Hey everybody, La Voyage de la Lune. All about the moon today on episode 4 of the Crosby Conundrum and Barber Dave's Shaves and Such. We'll be right back. Hey everybody, welcome to episode 4 of the Crosby Conundrum. And today it's all about the moon. And I kind of took a different tack at it, because most people thought because I am a huge NASA fan and everything else that I'd bring out all the NASA stuff. Well, there's going to be a little bit of that, but more so just the feeling of the moon. As we know, the moon has been with us as our celestial nightlight for as long as most people can remember. Was it always there? Who knows? But ships have navigated by it. Our tides are controlled by it. So our little partner out there in space is very, very important to us. And it is kind of the thing we look up to into the night sky and see most of the time. However, we don't know hardly anything about it. There's only a handful of people that have ever actually walked on the moon, and there's only a handful of machines that have actually landed on the moon. And the far side of the moon, it's not the dark side, it's the far side. You've got the near side and the far side, although being a Pink Floyd fan, I must say it's the dark side. But there are, the moon is tidally locked to us. So what we see is the same thing that they see on the other side of the world. It always faces this way, being the near side. So we've seen that. But the far side, or the dark side, if you care to use that nomenclature, we don't know a lot about. There've been a couple of landers on there, but they can't really transmit through there. And that's why we, as astronauts, have ever landed on the far side of the moon, because communication would be impossible. And that's not a good thing when you're 300,000 miles away. However, more and more research is going into what's on that side of the moon, including tons and tons and tons and tons of water ice. And with water ice comes the building blocks to make rocket fuel, which means that if we set up a base eventually and we start getting that water, basically our solar system is our backyard now, because people don't realize how hard it is to get, from a gravitational standpoint, to get off the Earth. We have to carry all our fuel with us. And it's incredibly expensive and incredibly slow. Whereas if we have ships on the moon already, 1/6 gravity, easy to get off the moon, and we can produce all the fuel we need right there. That's one aspect. The other aspect is the fact that they're finding helium-3. Now, helium-3 is extremely important because it could help create a fusion engine. And if we do that, then even the galaxy can be our friend. So it may not happen in our lifetime, but we got to get to the moon first and go back, because we haven't been there in almost 60 years, and we need to go back. So anyhow, earlier in the video, I had said La Voyage de la Lune. We're going to get to that a little bit later, but let's talk about what we're using today. Well, the first people that walked on the moon, Buzz Armstrong, Mike Collins, I just went blank. Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, Mike Collins. Apollo 11. So that's the soap we're going to be using today. A very nice light soap. It kind of looks like the moon, I guess. And during that time, there was a video that Mike Collins did when they were on the inbound leg to land on the moon, where he shaved. You know, everything they did in space was new, so shaving in space was considered like, hey, wow. And what he used was a Gillette Techmatic. Now, the cool thing about this is this whole cartridge right here is the razor blades, and they're on a ribbon, and they just keep going by and by and by, and you just flip this all the way around, and you have a brand new blade anytime you want it. I've been accused of owning the last of all these cartridges because I bought a huge lot of them, and I've got it set on 8. Very nice razor. I mean, not awesome all the time, but it's a great razor, and this razor went to the moon. Not this specific one, but this razor went to the moon. And I think that's pretty cool. For the brush today, we're going to be using my Moonstone brush. So that is Moonstone. And what's kind of cool about this is you got two types. You've got, so the near side or the light side, and you have the dark side. So this is Moonstone with a badger. I think this is a Thader with a badger knot on it. The other stuff we'll get to. So that's kind of my take on the moon. I do collect quite a bit of NASA memorabilia. I do have some stuff that has flown to the moon, but it's locked away and I don't bring it out. The soap is made by 11 Soaps, and Apollo is pretty much a Aventus clone. But it's really, really nice. But I'm not using any other things that are even similar to Aventus on this shave. Now, one thing I forgot to talk about is most people here and on the cadre know that I am a fairly avid watch collector. Well, one of my grail watches has always been the only watch that is officially, I'm not sure if it's officially, if it's the only one, but it's the only one that anybody talks about. And that's right, that is the Omega Speedmaster 42 millimeter moon watch. Now, I don't know if you can see this very well, but because I don't have my glasses on, but basically what it says is it says that it's flight qualified for all NASA space missions, and it was the very first watch that was worn on the moon. All the astronauts had them, and Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin both had these strapped to the outside of their spacesuits, and it was with a Hesselite crystal. That's the original, and that's what this is. And it's just, even though obviously this is not the watch that went to the moon, nor any of the, it's the history of this watch. It's a very plain chronograph, but the storied history of this watch is, number one, that it was the first watch on the moon. Number two, it saved the Bacon. Well, okay, that was a bad pun because Kevin Bacon played Jack Swigert. But it saved Apollo 13 because he had to time the burn that was manually done so they could get back home with this watch. There are other watches that have been to the moon. Rolex and Bulova. Famously, Dave Scott wore a Bulova on the Hadley Rill on Apollo 16. And Jack Swigert actually had a Rolex. It was actually Jim Lovell's watch that he did the timing on. He had a Rolex. So those watches have been doing. I don't think Rolex ever was flight qualified to be worn in space. I think the Bulova was. And there's been other watches obviously worn into space, including G-Shock, including Fortis, and stuff like that. But as far as I know, and I may be wrong, and if I'm wrong, put that in the comments, that I think that even though Rolex and Omega went through the same standards as far as getting approved as a watch for NASA qualified flight missions, I think the Omega was the only one that officially, and maybe the Bulova, that I don't know. It was called the Bulova Astronaut later on. So it's hard to say if that was. But that being said, it's kind of cool to be wearing on your wrist a watch that actually, where the actual watch itself. And this is the same configuration as when these watches first came out. It's got the Hesselite crystal, the same band, same movement. This is a hand-wound movement. It's not automatic. And it's a piece of NASA history that you just can't go without. Okay, let's see how we shave today. This is a brand new blade that I advanced, and it's really, really smooth. And, it's kind of cool that to be able to shave with the same style of razor that was shaved with in the command module in space. It's just really cool, I think. Now, there have been, I guess I'll talk about the elephant in the room. There have been tons and tons of conspiracy theories that we never made it to the moon. I will reserve, you're allowed to believe what you want to believe, but having met most of the Apollo astronauts during various book signings and stuff like that, not to mention that I've been very honored to have shaved and given haircuts to 2 of the Apollo astronauts, because they lived in a retirement community near where my shop is. So it means a lot to me, and we need to go back. That's all there is to it. The soap is really, really nice. Aventus, believe it or not, has, or any clones of Aventus, has almost reached a celestial reputation. See what I did there? It's a fun razor to use. And the cartridge just pops off. So you have, and there's a counter so you can see how many shaves or how many blades are left. I usually advance this. Well, I don't shave with it that often, so maybe once a year. But I figured I'd advance it for today's shave. Pretty good for the first 2 passes. It's very slick soap. And fun to use. So I hope, like I said, this is a little bit different take on the moon. And like I said, there's only 1 episode left of the Crosby Conundrum. If you have liked these challenges that Stephen Hasai has given me, let us know, and we may be, depending on him, if he wants to, we can do more. One thing that's really cool about the Techmatic is that it's really almost at the perfect angle when holding it, which is kind of cool. And I'd mentioned earlier that the two gentlemen that I gave haircuts to and shaves, one was Jim McDivitt, who just recently, about a year or so ago, passed away. And he was the first man to walk in space from the U.S. And he was the commander of Apollo 10. And then also Dick Gordon, who was the command module pilot for Apollo 12. And you can argue that the Apollo 12 crew, which was Dick Gordon as the command module pilot, Pete Conrad was the commander, and I'm sorry, it escapes me right now who the lunar module pilot was. But I did get to meet, in fact, Dick Gordon and the other gentleman. He's an artist. Oh, I'm just blanking out today. Don't get old. But Dick Gordon lived in Tucson. And I never got a chance, sadly, to meet Pete Conrad because he died in a motorcycle accident the year before this get-together. Because in Tucson, there's a get-together by a very well-known space artist by the name of Kim Poor. It's called Space Fest. And he would invite all the Apollo astronauts, Mercury astronauts that were still living, and you could meet with them and stuff like that. So it was pretty cool. Plus, he had a lot of stuff that was signed by the astronauts. In fact, some of the stuff that I own was through what they call Nova Graphics. And you can actually look at novagraphics.com online and see some of the stuff. And they're one of the few places that still has flown items. There's really not too many landed on the moon items left, but there's a lot of neat stuff there. Virtually no burn on the alum. So yeah, if you can find a Techmatic, are they worth having? Sure. They're a fun razor. The fact that you can advance the blade in a ribbon. The hardest part is getting these cartridges. That's why I bought so many when I did. I was also fortunate when I found the Techmatic to get a cased version, which has got, really cool. It snaps in there, has its own little place. And I keep this in a different spot than the rest of my razors. It's got its claim to fame in my space case, so to speak. So again, the brush was the Thader Moonstone brush, which is kind of cool because it's got the near side and the far side. So that's kind of cool. So a very nice shave for episode 4. For our, what are we going to use? Yeah, we're going to use Quinn's Cucumber Mint for our Witch Hazel today. Now there are a ton of space-themed soaps. In fact, probably the one that comes to mind, I mean, a bunch of them that come to mind are by Phoenix, PAA, Phoenix Accoutrements, just up the road here. He's got all kinds of space-related type soaps, and there's other ones out there and so forth. But for today, I wanted to, kind of like I said, something a little bit different. And I wanted to give homage to all the astronauts, homage to the moon, what future we have up there, which is huge. And then for the aftershave, I wanted something that kind of fit that space moon theme. And this is something I have not used. In fact, it's covered in talc. I haven't used it in a long time. That's Saponificio Veracino's Cosmo. And it's got kind of a really unique scent to it. Maybe a little spicy, a little floral. ozone, and very good for the skin, but also very unique, such as our moon, and that's why I used Cosmo. Now, when Neil Armstrong landed on the moon, aside from his famous one small step for man, he also later on talked about when he took that step off the lander, and he said that his boots depressed down into the lunar surface, and he said almost 1 to 2 inches, and I'm paraphrasing here, but that his boot went down 1 to 2 inches, and it had the consistency of powder. Ha! There's the tie-in. So we're going to be using moon powder today. Well, okay, it's not moon powder, but he said it had the consistency of like a powder. So just in your mind's eye, just pretend that we are using moon dust. And actually, you could argue that talc. Ooh, and see, it's also foggy on the moon too. Whoa. Okay, I think this is the biggest talc bomb that I've done in a while. Wow. That's a ghostly image, isn't it? But much better. Woohoo! Anyways, finally, in the early part of the video, I said, "Le Voyage de la Lune." Well, this was a movie. It was probably one of the first science fiction movies, and it was quick, by Georges Méliès. He had visions of what would happen on the moon. If you ever get a chance to watch it, do. Or you can get a DVD set called From the Earth to the Moon. Highly recommended. It was done by Tom Hanks and HBO Films, and it's I think a 12-part series, and it's all on DVDs. And it talks about from the beginning of the Apollo to the end, and one of the final episodes talks about Georges Méliès and La Voyage de la Lune. And it was about a voyage of intrepid scientists that wanted to go visit the moon, and what would we find on the moon. And this movie came out in 1902. So the special effects that he did were amazing for that time frame. And it's corny and it's kooky, but it's also, if you're a film buff like I am, it's one of the greatest films ever because of the imagination that Georges Méliès had. And unfortunately, he died broke because, it just didn't work out. So even though the cologne I'm using came out in 1912, Georges Méliès being French, and this fragrance is very French inspired. Most people think it smells like a casket, but it's very floral. And fragrances of the time, of the early 1900s, were very floral because, let's face it, bathing wasn't exactly a daily thing. So what they would do is they would use colognes and powders to make themselves smell fresh. So to me, this fits the bill because this came out in 1912, and it's been in consistent production since then. People laugh about it. This fragrance goes along the same line as tobacco. It really does. But it is Eucharist. Very French inspired. It's something that I think Georges Méliès would wear. Yeah, it's wonderful. And it fits with, because if you look at the way it looks, you'd think that this would be something that a scientist or an astronaut in 1912 would take with him to the moon, because he would want, as is stated in the movie, the moon fairies and the moon men to reach out, shake your hand, and smell fragrant. And he would give them flowers and everything else. The interesting thing is about La Voyage de la Lune is they were shot out of a big cannon. And they had a capsule, and he already knew about this stuff. There was a capsule, and a lot of this stuff inspired all the stuff we did later on, including Elon Musk with Starship. And there's actually a rail cannon that they're looking at building that it would shoot stuff into space. So it's amazing how the visions of people back in the early days kept this going. And I really, really, really appreciate that Stephen Heise did this challenge because it's something that's extremely dear to my heart. And as Buzz Aldrin would say, not only do we need to get our asses back to the moon, but let's get our asses to Mars. Anyway, guys, thanks for joining us for the Crosby Conundrum for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Please put that down in the comments. And if you like what you see here, join us at the Cadre, www.theshavingcadre.com. And then also join me and my buddy Dave at Drinks and Dave's. That's our live talk show every Tuesday night at 6 p.m. Pacific. And this week is going to be interesting because it's called Clothing, the slobification of our society. And we're going to talk all about how clothing has gone from beauty to this. Anyhow, I'm Barber Dave. This has been Barber Dave Shaves and Such. I hope you have a wonderful Sunday. And we'll see you tomorrow for another shave. And please let me know what you thought of this. And if you'd like to see more of the Crosby Conundrum. Have a great day, folks. Blessed Sunday to you.